My kind and talented daughter passed away suddenly due to an illness. While I was deeply saddened by her departure at the young age of 10, I managed to hold her funeral. However, despite it being our daughter's funeral, my husband was nowhere to be found.
What? Now? I'm at the amusement park with Elena. Huh? Funeral? I don't care.
To my surprise, my husband skipped our daughter's funeral and prioritized an amusement park date with his niece.
I can't cancel now. Elena will cry.
As I was in despair over my husband's unbelievable behavior, I could only stand there in shock. However, a few days later, my husband showed up in front of me, looking completely different, as if he was struck by divine punishment. My name is Harlow. I live with my daughter, who is in 5th grade, and my husband. My husband is an office worker and never helps with household chores, using his job as an excuse. Although I'm filled with dissatisfaction towards my husband, I cannot complain, since we rely on his income. Therefore, I'm doing all the household chores and taking care of our child by myself, while working part-time.
Mom, I'll wash the dishes. You take a break. Milani, thank you as always. I appreciate it. No problem, it's nothing. Thank you for the delicious meals every day.
My daughter, Milani, spends a lot of time with me and sees my struggles closely, so she tries to help me whenever she can, and she is a kind child. My daughter excels in school, earning high praise from her teachers. She seems to have a lot of friends, and she goes to school happily every day. I'm so proud of my daughter. However, my husband doesn't show much interest in her. He has a beautiful older sister who has a daughter entering elementary school next year. His sister divorced her husband a few years ago, and she and her daughter live with our in-laws now. My sister-in-law is the type who puts herself first, wanting to live life doing what she likes, and she often leaves her daughter with my parents-in-law and goes out to have fun. She is a person who makes me wonder if she even has common sense, as she doesn't take care of her own daughter. Even though she gained custody after the divorce, she treats her own daughter as if she were a nuisance, making me wonder about her mentality. In contrast to my feelings towards my sister-in-law, my husband seems to love her since he was little. He also adores our niece, who resembles his beautiful sister, Anne. He takes her out frequently. However, I speculate that my husband takes our niece out mainly because he likes the attention he gets when he is with her. Our pretty niece attracts attention, and people assume that they are a father and daughter when they are walking together. It seems that people often see him as a good father who is spending time with his daughter on his day off. When he takes our niece out and takes care of her, that makes my parents-in-law complain less. And it seems to be helping my sister-in-law as well. In other words, my husband superficially adores our niece, but fundamentally, he doesn't consider her feelings. He just sees her as a convenient presence for himself. My husband is a self-centered person just like his sister. Despite claiming to be busy with work, he often spends valuable weekends with his sister-in-law and our niece. I am constantly irritated by my husband's attitude, prioritizing his sister over us, his own family.
Hey, where are you going? Just a shopping date with my adorable niece. Again? Spend time with Milani once in a while. Milani is at an age where she probably dislikes being with her father. She wouldn't care if I'm here or not.
Unlike my neglectful husband and sister-in-law, my parents-in-law are sensible people who are concerned about my husband's actions.
Harlow, I'm sorry. We've been telling him that it's about time he let go of his sister, spent less time taking Elena out for a selfish reason, and spent more time with you guys, but I wonder where we went wrong in raising them. I'm sorry for making you go through this because of our children.
My parents-in-law showed their concern for my daughter, me, and my niece. They are kind people who genuinely care. Thanks to my in-laws, I had somehow been able to tolerate the actions of my husband and sister-in-law. However, my mother-in-law passed away recently, and their behavior has escalated. Since there was no sign of my husband's behavior of prioritizing his sister and niece changing, I had been agonizing, wanting him to change his attitude for the sake of our daughter. In the midst of this, a tragedy struck.
Mom, thank you for everything until now. I'm sorry for leaving this world first. Milani.
My daughter, who was about to enter junior high school, contracted a sudden infectious disease, and despite my efforts to care for her, she passed away. She was gone too soon, and I was in deep sorrow. While my body was about to give up, I forced myself to keep moving, and I somehow managed to arrange my daughter's funeral. However, just as the funeral was about to begin, a shocking event occurred. Surprisingly, even though it was his own daughter's funeral, my husband wasn't at the funeral venue.
Hey, where are you? Milani's funeral is about to start.
When I called my husband in a panic, he said something unbelievable.
Huh? I told you that. I was going to an amusement park with Elena, didn't I? What?
Shocked by my husband's absurd response, my mind went completely blank. As I fell silent, my husband continued in a cheerful tone.
It's Elena's celebration for entering elementary school. She's been looking forward to it, so I can't cancel it now. You should be able to handle the funeral on your own. All right then, bye.
With just those words, my husband hung up. While I was devastated by loss of my daughter, his unimaginable attitude struck me as another blow. How on earth could he prioritize an outing with his niece over the funeral of his own daughter? Overwhelmed by my husband's terrible attitude, I felt hopeless, unable to think, and stood there, dumbfounded. Then, my father-in-law kindly approached me, looking concerned.
Harlow, I'm really sorry about my foolish son. Well, there's no need for you to apologize.
My daughter's funeral proceeded quietly without my husband in the end. I decided to complain when he returned home. This time, he went too far. After the funeral, I waited for my husband to return while pondering this, but no matter how much time passed, he didn't come back. I checked with my father-in-law, thinking he might have gone to our in-laws' home with his sister, but he wasn't there either. Moreover, not only my husband, but also my sister-in-law and niece were missing. My mental state was at rock bottom, as I was already devastated by the loss of my daughter, and I was abandoned by my husband on top of that. However, I couldn't just ignore the fact that my husband, sister-in-law, and niece were missing. Especially right after losing my daughter, I couldn't shake the feeling that something might have happened to them. Anxious, I desperately searched for them. But no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find them, and I spent several days in anguish. While I was spending days like that, on the 13th day,
Harlow, Elena has returned.
I received a call from my father-in-law, and he said that my niece had suddenly returned. I hurriedly headed to my in-laws' home.
Elena. Oh, I'm so relieved. Auntie, I'm sorry for worrying you.
Since I was so happy to be able to see my niece again, I couldn't help but embrace her. Then, my niece, who had been somewhat in a daze until then, burst into tears. Once my niece had calmed down, I released my arms from her, and when I looked her properly, I noticed that she had injuries all over, looking visibly worn out.
What are those injuries from? Have your mom and uncle done this to you? I mean, where are your mom and uncle anyway?
When I asked my niece, who seemed to have returned alone, she shook her head and explained that she got the injuries on her way back here. Then, she started telling me an unexpected story.
You know, Grandma helped me. Huh? What do you mean?
According to my niece, on the day of my daughter's funeral, she was indeed taken to the amusement park by my husband. Afterward, my sister-in-law joined them inside the park, and the three of them were having a good time together. My niece seemed to have enjoyed the rides at the amusement park in the beginning, but the situation changed drastically in the evening. As night fell, with no signs of returning home, my niece became anxious and asked my sister-in-law and husband, and she received the response, "We're not going home today." Apparently, my husband, sister-in-law, and niece stayed in a hotel near the amusement park for a few days.
You don't have to go to daycare for a while. Isn't it nice? Elena, you like spending time with us, right?
Despite my niece loving daycare, my sister-in-law and husband said as if Elena preferred spending time with them. Even in the eyes of my young niece, it seemed strange to stay in a place that was not her home for days on end, and negative emotions, such as confusion, were more evident than happiness. Moreover, my husband and sister-in-law left my niece alone in the hotel room, going out for shopping and meals, while she spent her time eating, given snacks like bread. As my niece was abandoned and lonely, she cried, wanting to go home. Then, at one point, my deceased mother-in-law appeared, she said.
She was a bit translucent, but it was unmistakably Grandma. She had encouraged me, saying hang in there just a little longer. You will definitely be able to go home. Count on me.
While being comforted by the mysterious mother-in-law, who only appeared when my niece was left alone, she managed to get through the days. One day, apparently my sister-in-law and husband went out, leaving a wallet behind. My niece seized the opportunity, took out some money from the wallet, slipped out of the hotel, and returned home.
Oh, you went though a lot. How did you manage to find your way back home?
I wondered aloud, my niece replied, with a slightly lonely smile.
Grandma guided me, all the way. When we arrived home, she disappeared, but she had been with me the whole time, guiding me in taxis and walking together.
After that, my niece said that my sister-in-law and husband were probably still there, and told us about the hotel where they had been staying. I hugged my niece again, with a thought, "You have done well." And as a precaution, I took her to the hospital, and she was admitted for examination. Even though I thought she was fine, my niece looked considerably more worn out compared to before, and I was concerned about malnutrition, among other things. After my niece was admitted to the hospital, my father-in-law and I went to the hotel she had told us about, and found my sister-in-law and husband. I was determined to condemn them for abandoning my niece after dragging her around, as well as missing our daughter's funeral. However, the situation was unexpected.
What's wrong with you, Maddie? How could you skip Milani's funeral, drag Elena around, and then go out with my husband, abandoning her? What were you thinking? Oh, we're sorry. We messed up. I'm sorry. We're reflecting on it, so please forgive us.
Upon seeing my father-in-law and me, my husband and sister-in-law desperately kept apologizing. Moreover, they seemed scared, and couldn't engage in a proper conversation. As my father-in-law and I were perplexed, my sister-in-law suddenly began behaving uncontrollably, waving her arms around as if she was resisting something.
Don't come near me. I'm sorry, I won't do it anymore,
she yelled. Seeing her like that, we wondered what was happening to her. Meanwhile, my husband repeated deliriously, trembling.
Mom is angry with us. What should we do? Please forgive us, please.
While my husband and sister-in-law trembled and acted uncontrollably, muttering these words, we looked at them with cold eyes. Terrified by the spirit of my late mother-in-law, my husband and sister-in-law had become utterly emaciated, and were in a state where they couldn't even lead a normal life. It seemed that they had been severely scolded and threatened by the spirit of my mother-in-law, and they had a mental breakdown in the end. When my husband took my niece to the amusement park with my sister-in-law, he was apparently on a paid leave. However, he was not in a mental state where he could work anymore and couldn't even communicate with colleagues at work. Consequently, my husband ended up resigning. After that, I divorced my husband. Until now, I didn't get divorced for the sake of my daughter, and stayed married, but now that she is gone, there is no need for that. Since I had been fed up with my husband's consistently neglectful attitude, I decided to cut ties with him once and for all. After abandoned by me, my husband sought help from my father-in-law along with my sister-in-law, but it seems my father-in-law also turned them away.
Dad, please help us. You won't abandon us, right? We've reflected on our actions, and we won't do the same things again, so I can't help people who neglect their family which they are supposed to protect, and do whatever they want. You should be ashamed for doing something like that at your age. Sort it out yourselves.
Since my father-in-law said it so assertively, my husband and sister-in-law couldn't plead with him anymore, and they bowed their heads in defeat. After being discharged, my niece had no intention of living with my sister-in-law in her current state, and she chose to live with my father-in-law in their family home. I occasionally visit my in-laws' home to check on my niece, and her expression has become brighter compared to the time she lived with my sister-in-law. I hope that my niece continues to have a happy life. While praying for that, I see her maintaining a moderate distance. As I lost my daughter and divorced my husband in a short period of time, my daily life turned chaotic. But when everything settled down, my late mother-in-law and daughter appeared in my dreams. In the dream, they smiled gently.
You don't need to worry anymore, Harlow. Do the things you love from now on. Since you endured so much, I hope you have a joyful life from now on. We'll always be watching over you.
Touched by the kind words of my mother-in-law and daughter in the dream, my eyes were filled with tears.
Thank you, Val, Milani. I miss you, but I'll try my best to live my life.
The two people I love are watching over me. A comforting feeling slowly enveloped me with that thought, and I pledged to live strong from that moment onward.